All right, welcome back to another Relearning Angular video. This series is me doing just that. I'm relearning Angular because I've forgotten it, and whether you're new to Angular entirely or you're like me and you're relearning it again, hopefully this series is beneficial and you can go back to the beginning. I have a whole playlist of these videos that you can go check out. Today we're talking about routing. I promised this in the last video when we set up a Bootstrap navbar, so I hope you have that set up too if you're following along. And there's a few things you need to do ahead of time if you didn't set up your project specifically the way I did. So if you remember the very first video when we created our project, one of the first prompts it asks you when creating a new project is if you want to add routing to your project. We said yes, because it does some things automatically for us that we don't need to create. But if you said no for whatever reason, I'm going to link this down in the description. There's a few things you need to do. First, you need to create a file called app-routing.module, and that's going to look like this. So you can actually just copy and paste this whole thing and put it into that file. And then in the app module, you're going to import that into the imports array. But when we created our project, as it mentions here, the CLI added this automatically. We can go check that out. So let's go to the app module here in the Explorer. I have a lot of things open. Maybe I should close some of these things. There we go. Okay, so we're back in the app module, and it already imported our app routing module. And we also have a file here called app-routing-module.ts. And here it is. It's just like the one we just saw on the Angular website. So feel free to copy those if you didn't select yes in the prompt. So I'm going to kill this from running, and we're going to generate a couple components. If you remember, let's go back to our navbar. I said we're going to have a home link and an about link. So why don't we create two components, one for our home page and one for our about page. So I'm going to ng-gc, so we're going to generate a component and call this home, and we're going to also ng-gc an about component. And once these get created, of course, I'm going to delete the spec TypeScript to at least remove some of these things that we don't need from each of these components. And if you are following along, feel free to actually, go about this in a way that you would like to see an about page. But for me, I'm going to just make an unordered list, have a few list items about what this site is for. So I guess the theme of this site so far has been about movies. So let's do a list here of what you can find. So my favorite movies, and let's create another list item, reviews, and what else? One more thing that I can think of. What else could we put on this website? Maybe upcoming movies. Maybe I list out upcoming movies that are going to be released, and let's put a header up here and say things you will find on this site. Of course, this isn't a good about page. I know that, but I'm just doing this to show you a couple different components that we're going to display when routing. So that's our about page. That looks good to me. I'm going to leave the rest as is. Now let's go to our home component, and we're going to put another H2. It says welcome to my movies. I just made that up. That's going to be the name of this web app. It's going to be my movies. And a place for movie lovers. Okay, so that's what our homepage is going to say. It's going to have a heading or a header and a paragraph. And now if we go to the app component, I'm going to remove everything here except the app navbar. And here we're going to put an Angular tag called router outlet. And what this is going to do whenever we route or whenever we decide to display a new component, this is where that component is going to go. And it'll make more sense once we set up routing. You'll see what I mean by that. But just know this is going to be the placeholder of where that component is going to go once it's routed to. Once we say, hey, I want to view this component, the about component, for example, it's going to place it right here. So now let's go to the app routing module, and this is where we're going to set our routes, specifically in this routes array. And this routes array is going to hold JavaScript objects, so they're going to be in curly braces, and there's going to be two properties of this object. So there's going to be a path, and this is going to be part of the URL. What's part of the URL that you want to send people to a particular component? So for this, I'm going to say about, and then another property we need to set is what component is related with this path. So for us, it's going to be the about component. Notice when I let it autocomplete, it'll import that up above so it knows what component that is. Then we're going to do a comma and do this again, but for the home page. So just like about, I'm going to say the path for this is home, and the component is going to be the home component. So we need to remember these paths because we need to add them to the anchor tags in our navbar. So we have about and we have home, and let's go to our navbar now, our navbar HTML, and we no longer need this href to send us to a path. Instead, we are going to say router link, capital L, is equal to, and for this one, it's going to be slash home, right? Because that's the path for the home component that we set. And same down here, instead of href in the about, we're going to do router link is equal to slash about, because about is the path that we gave the other one. So I believe everything is set up now. We have our two anchor tags, which users are going to click on to switch views and or display different components. We have it set up to say, okay, well, what path is equal to what component? So if I click on the about button, it's going to show the about component. If I click on the home button, it should show the home component. And then lastly, in the app component HTML, we have the Angular tag router outlet because that's where it's going to be displayed in the HTML. So let's go ahead and compile this ngserve-o, and maybe once you see everything, it'll make a little more sense. Okay, so right off the bat, we have an empty area under here. Now, if I click the home button, we see at the bottom left, it shows the URL that's going to go to is localhost 4200/home. So if we click that, notice now it shows the content of that home component. So we have the home template here, the HTML. And if I go to about, same thing, it's going to be slash about. Hopefully you can see that down in the bottom left. And if we click that, this will be displaying the about component. Notice where it puts that about component and also the home component. It puts it where we put this router outlet. Now you wouldn't want to do this in real life, but if I put this above the nav bar for some unknown reason, notice now it's above it because that's where it's going to display the component. But obviously that wouldn't make sense, so let's put it down below it. So one more thing to note, I don't have to hit a button to go there. Let's go back to localhost 4200 where it's completely blank, and I'll just do /home up here, and it'll also display the component based on the route in the URL. Right? So what if someone does something like this? They go /test. Well, there is no route for /test, so it's just not going to display anything. So what if we want a default page for routes that don't really exist? So I'm going to hit the plus down here in VS Code to open a new terminal because I'm going to generate another component. So let's do nggc default is what I'm going to name this one. Now if we look at our default component, delete the spec TypeScript, and let's go to the HTML and we'll say something like, whoops, you must be lost, or something like that. I don't know. So now if we go back to the app routing module, let's add one more route here. So we'll do a comma and squiggly braces, we'll say path, and this one is just going to be a default path, a catch-all, I guess. So we'll do two wildcards here, and then we'll say the component that's going to show is going to be the default component way down here. right? And the order of this matters. So this is the wildcard, which means it's going to catch pretty much everything. But if I put this at the top of this array, it's going to catch everything, no matter if we put /home or /about in the URL. We can show that maybe after I show you what happens now. So now if we do 4200, and it did it right off the bat because there's no slash in the URL. But if I just do /test, it's also going to give me that one. And if I go to home, it'll show me the home component and the about component because it found that in the routes array. But notice if I take this and I cut it, get rid of this comma, and I now put it at the top of this array, right? This is going to be the first valid path that it's going to find no matter what I click. So if I click home, notice it's /home, it's still going to show that default component, even though there is a route for home. But it also matches this pattern. It matches the wildcard. So it's going to pick that up first. So it's first come, first serve. And if you're using wildcards like I'm doing here, you never want to put that at the very front because that'll catch everything, and then routing will be completely useless at that point. So that's why I'll put it at the end. So that's routing basics in the nutshell. We might go over a little bit more in the next video. Feel free to play around with your own routes, change the path name. Don't follow exactly as I do, and notice how things change. How if I change this and I change it to abouts, right, and I try to go to about, it doesn't know what this path is anymore because now it's abouts. So I have to change it to abouts, and we get the right component now. So play around with that, get a feel for what's going on, and I hope to see you in the next video.